Josh, my guy. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for coming today.
Heck yeah, I love it.
Listen to me. You're an individual who's not too old. You've kicked some ass in the world, took your licks, you did it yourself. But one thing that I have a great appreciation for, I had an experience in my life a couple times where I struggled with something really hard, be it writing, be it making money, be it organizing myself, whatever. And the second I felt like I figured it out, I immediately turned around. It's like, I bet I could help people with this. That's how I found my first career in education, because I learned, very painstakingly how to write and communicate effectively. And I was like, I want to share this with people. And a lot of things like that. You're doing the same thing. You figured out a way to make money, organize your life, and be successful very much before the age of 30. And you're attempting to share that with people. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate it. This movement that we're creating for young people is called Ignite Gen Z. And for me, it's like, how do we take these old school personal development lessons, the Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, that's the kind of stuff that I grew up with, and that was before my time, but I'm an old soul. How do we take that and teach the next generation, Gen Z, people in their 20s, college, high school, teach these old school personal development lessons? But I've realized something, that people in that age group do not consume information the same way that you did, or even I did when I was in high school or college, or, early on. And we want to take those lessons and put them in a more engaging, fun, modern day format. And so that's what we're looking to do. Is those are the things that actually brought me success. We've been blessed to have a business that at age 27, we could sell for multiple 8 figures. I have 4 little kids. So I don't have, people say, oh, you don't have that excuse. You're just single and grind it out. No, I got those kids. Right. If I can do that, just some farm kid in Idaho can go do that, then the lessons actually work. I wasn't born with some crazy amount of talent that somebody else wasn't. So how can we go bring those to the rest of the world in that generation specifically? And that's what I'm most excited about. It's like, dude, I don't want to retire. Let's go make something of this life and help some people in the process. You must have seen some of the old school Jim Rohn seminars on, and it's like, they hold up still, and it's grainy. That was like late 70s, early 80s. A lot of that film, he would have like a blackboard, and he'd be talking. The people in the audience too, when those seminars would cut to the audience, everybody's dressed to the nines. Yeah. Like the ladies have the frilly lace necks on their shirts, and that content still holds up. The actual quality of it is poor, but the content itself, the ideas, man, they work. Like, it's time and time again. It's interesting. You read, I was a rower in college, and there was this, my coach, who was Steve Gladstone, who was the winningest coach in like college rowing history. He read a book. His guy was Steve Fairbairn, who was this old rowing coach from the 20s. And that was the first time I realized at the end of the day, with most successful people, the lessons don't change. The messages don't change. It's like, no. This guy in the 20s was talking about efficiency. He was talking about self-determination. One big thing that Fairbairn said that related to my professional life and yours as well, I have to imagine, is he was like, listen, if the coach still has to coach the rower will never get there, right? The second the rower becomes his own coach, that's when progress will happen. And the idea is, look, if you need somebody to self-assess you constantly, and you can't self-assess, you can't say like, am I doing a good job or bad? You have everything you need to know. Was it good or is it bad? Are you happy with the day? You're not happy with the day. And if you're waiting for somebody else to point things out that you did well or didn't do well, you'll never get there. And it's like, I feel like with people that are self-made as you are and successful, that's one of the biggest things. It's like, you gotta just own it one way or another. It's kind of like this extrinsically motivated versus like internal, like intrinsic motivation. Is if somebody has to sit there and prod you, like you're saying, and coach you and tell you every little thing and micromanage you, there's only a little bit of success that's going to happen. It's not going to be lasting. But if you can help somebody on the inside of them say like, I'm going to go somewhere in life. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to learn the skills. I'm going to put the effort in. I'm going to do the whole hard blood, sweat, and tears thing.
Right.
And we're going to make something of my life. That's when you see like big things happen. And I just love those lessons. It's a lot of attitude and positivity, and there's just a lot of negativity in the world. And how do we combat that? Well, you can't fight it with negativity. You got to fight it with positivity. So again, we go through a bunch of that, goal setting. I call it the GPA framework, instead of GPA like school GPA, grade point average, it's goals, planning, and action.
Yeah.
How do you set goals that matter? Actually go out and take a plan and strategically figure out how you're going to get there. You know, what's the actual plan that's going to work? And then something that we see a lot of people, and it's easy for any of us, and we've talked about this on my show before, is taking like immediate action. And you can have all the plans in the world, all the goals that you want, but how many people actually take step one? I would love to find a stat on that.
Right.
Like how many people actually take step one of the plan and go out and just do the damn thing? I don't think it's very many.
I would really agree with you on that point. I have a very dear friend, and she's starting a consulting thing, and she sent me this. It was like a 3-page, AI assisted 3-page business model. And I was like, done. That looks great. She's like, well, what do you mean does it look great? I'm like, gee, it's just a like, it's just a model. It's just a plan. Like, just get your one-liner out. Let's start iron out a value prop, the whole thing. And it's this anxiety and hesitation where it's like, just take action. And she was like, I'm good at planning. I'm good at delegating. Like, I'm nervous going into the unknown. It's like, that's the whole nature of this. It's never going to go away. Like, you have to be okay with not knowing where you're going. And here she's, like a very successful person, but stepping out for the first time and inventing something, creating this niche, this consulting thing. This to her is like, oh my God, I can't. And she's struggling with what you're saying. Just take action. Take action today. Do like 3 things today. Do 3 new things tomorrow. Don't stop. Just keep going.
Just like pick the phone up and make the call. And it's easier said than done. Like, it's a habit. So like, I'm better at it than I used to be. But it's like, how do you just take that first step?
I don't mean to interrupt you. What was your first cold call? What was it?
Oh,
I remember my first one. I'll tell you. Tell me your first one.
So I get in the business. I was 19 years old.
Yeah.
I screw college. I got out of that.
Yeah, sure.
4 months in. It just wasn't for me. Go back and I'm selling auto insurance with my dad.
All right.
And I was made $14,000 my first year, so you can see how well the story went. But I went out and I sold this guy an auto policy. And for namesake, I'll just say his name is Jim.
Jim.
And I walk in, I was so excited. I overcame this cranky, crotchety old guy on the phone. And I overcame this and I sold him an auto policy. And I was like, yes, I freaking did it. And I walk into my dad's office and he's like, how'd it go? And I was like, yeah, I spent all morning. I called all these people. I sold this guy. He's like, oh, who is it? I might know him. And I was like, Jim, whatever his last name was.
Yeah.
And he goes, what? You sold Jim an auto? I've been trying to get rid of that guy for years because he was the cranky old guy. We only have like 5 bad customers ever, and he's one of them. And I was like, oh man. So like my big win, like I sold the one guy on the planet. The one guy, my dad's like the nicest human on earth.
Man,
the one guy that he didn't necessarily want to have around anymore. And I was like, well, okay. But it was just like overcoming this cranky, and I was like being the nice kid, I was scared to death. But like it doesn't get easier when you start doing bigger things. You still have that feeling. I'm sure you've done it a million times where it's like, okay, now a cold call is no big deal for me.
Sure.
Because I've mastered, the ability to overcome that fear. But the next thing is, okay, the first time you hosted a podcast on this show,
sure,
there was going to be some nerves and you just
right.
got to jump in and do the dang thing.
Right.
And it just, I constantly see the people around me that I want around me are those that like, hey, the fear doesn't go away because we keep doing bigger things.
Right.
It's not like I'm not fearful of doing it.
Right.
I just think courage is just doing it anyway.
Listen, I couldn't agree more. My first cold call, I'm 22. I just graduated from college. I'd been tutoring when I was at Cal, and I graduate and I decide, I'm like, okay, I'm going to stick with this tutoring thing. The whole point of education is like, you're not going to make any money if you go into public education. You're not going to be able to exist in the way you want to with a family and things. Again, in the area you want to, you're going to have to do this private education. And so I meet a guy. He's like, all right, look, this is what you do. He gave me like 5 minutes. He's like, this is what you do. You take this book. It's the WACAC book. It's the Western Association of Accredited College Counselors or something. I'm like, okay, awesome. I'm like writing down notes. I'm like, take the WACAC. He's like, no, literally take it here. And I was like, okay. He's like, call the people in your area and just tell them you're a SAT tutor and you want to take them out to lunch to show them your program. I'm like, okay, show them the program. He's like, stop writing down. I'm like, okay. So I go home and I'm staring at this book all week, right? Because you're staring at it and you're like, there it is. And it's just talking trash to me the whole week. It's like, you little bitch, you're not even going to open me up. I'm like, I'm going to open you up. I'm going to make a phone call off of that. Yeah. So finally I realized the week's coming to an end. It's 4:00 on a Friday. And I know at this point, it's like, you've had that all week. You're going to let this week go by without even cracking it open once. And if a week can go by, your lifetime's going to go by.
Amen.
So I open it up. I find this gal. She's out of the business. Name was Nancy. So I find this. I'm like, okay, Nancy's in my area. Okay, so I call the phone. My hand's shaking. Like I can't even dial it. I'm like I'm living in a studio apartment that's a converted 2-car garage in this person's backyard. And by the way, half of the 2-car garage was a storage area for them. So like they carved out a storage, and then I got the rest of it. And so I'm like, hold it, and I dial it. And Nancy picks up the phone. I'm like, hey, I'm Matt. I'm an SAT. Like, I'd love to take you to lunch. She's like, okay, you're calling at a very inappropriate time. I'm like, oh my gosh, so she's like mad on the phone, but I do get her to go to lunch with me. I buy her lunch. I go in my best polo shirt and like pants that don't fit because I'm 22. And I go and I show her the thing, and I'm like, and then she starts referring a couple people to do the next call and then the next call and the same thing, and like trying to be polite and happy. And I was going to meet with these, professional women that were, in their 40s and 50s and been in this career for a long time. So they're staking their reputation when they refer people to me. But they're like, well, what are you going to say to people that say you're really young? I'm like, well, I think one of the problems is, are you looking for an old person or are you looking for an educator? Because I'm an educator and I've been teaching at Cal for years, and that's what I'm going to keep doing. They're like, oh, now mind you, I was a rhetoric major, so I was quick on the spot.
Well,
So,
it definitely helps.
yeah.
I just love the story. It's like, I love the visual of like, am I going to open that damn book or not? Like, it's been there for a week.
it was a side-eyeing
And it's
the
like-
whole week.
It's like, well, right after, and then we come up with all these excuses, right? It's just human nature. Oh, well, right after I do this. And then we have this laundry list of things that has to happen in the perfect order in order for me to take the action.
Right.
All that is like the simplicity of what he told you. He was onto something for sure. Because we want complexity because it lets us hide. Simplicity, you can't hide. Take the damn book and go call people out of it. That's the instructions. Well, where am I going to hide in that? Like, There's nowhere. But if he was like, you need to do this, and then you need to set up this online Facebook account, and then you need to do this over here, and you need to do 52 things, well, then you can kind of like hide in the strategic planning of it all and say, oh, well, I'm going to do this and this and this in this order. And then by the time you get to step 1, you're already like, I'm sick of this.
Right.
I don't even want to start.
Right.
I just lost all motivation. So for me, I love to corner myself. Like, I like to put myself where it's
That's
like,
great.
hey, I'm thinking about doing this right now. Like, if we have on this conversation, I'm sure something's going to happen where I'm like, that's a great idea. We should just literally do it right now, today.
Right now.
And yeah, sure, that puts you in some awkward spots later on. It's like, oh, I overcommitted to a bunch of stuff.
Sure.
But then you have to follow through.
Right.
It's inconvenient, but you see progress.
Right. You see it, and you can organize yourself more efficiently later on if you want, but you're taking action, and you can criticize the action. Maybe it wasn't the best action. Maybe it was flawed in some way. I went down the road. I made it down the road 3 steps. I had somebody, to your point, I was helping somebody else get a tutoring business off the ground, because again, mine took off pretty fast thereafter because I did exactly what I said. I'm high energy. I love teaching, right? So I was like, no problem. All the teenagers, like if you're 16 to 20, I got your number. Like it's really easy for me to relate to those people and help them. And anyway, so later on, years later, I was telling somebody the same thing and they got hung up. And what I realized is there are some people that could do it if you just literally show them how, if you reframe the problem, right? And so what I did with this person in particular, I said, look, you got to stop envisioning this as a cold call. Envision somebody who wants to find a better SAT tutor, or envision a client, a potential client that they leave a message like, well, what do I say when I call them back? They want to like you. They're dying to like you because they have a problem. They wouldn't be calling you if they didn't have a problem. They have a problem. The problem is they don't have an SAT tutor. They want an SAT tutor. And by the way, they don't want to have to call around a bunch. They want to love the first person they talk to. Just be that person.
I love
Just
that.
be that. And so she was like, okay, I think I can do it. I was like, great. She wants to love you. Just pick up the phone and call her. She just like, boom.
Be
instant.
lovable.
Yeah, it's like, oh, dude, we'll solve this problem for sure. This isn't even a problem. Like, great. Do you want to start tomorrow? Okay, great. We're gonna erase this off. It's those things. It's the simplicity in action, which is just do this, or model the behavior. One time with somebody else, I was like, just call the college counselor. Like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, watch, dial the phone. I'm like, hey, this is Matt. I have an associate. Somebody asked us about you. I'd love to take you out to coffee and find out what your program's like, so I can refer to you as a college counselor. They're like, oh, great. Boom. 10 seconds later, we had an appointment.
That's awesome. Well, you just have this natural energy, or maybe you really focus on it, but this energy, I think a lot of people discount what this like likability factor, like how much that plays into things. you talk about, the sales side of things.
Sure, sure.
We've been in a lot of sales. We do a lot of phone sales, thousands and thousands of insurance policies later. And I remember one guy walked into my office. He's been working with me for a while, and he goes, "I'm in a sales slump." And I said, "First of all, let's watch our language. let's not call it a sales slump. Let's call it like I'm having a challenge today, getting more sales."
Right.
And I said, "Well, if you listen back to some of your calls, you're starting to sound like you're just in it for a transaction." I said, "Why don't we, you think that you're saying the same thing all day, every day, and you're getting tired of hearing yourself say the same thing. But remember, the other person on the other side of the phone, it's the first time they've ever heard this. Right. So you've said this same script 1,000 times in the same way, same story, same everything. But like the other person on the other side of the phone, the prospect or the client, they've never heard this before. So we owe it to them to perform and show up for them. So instead of saying I'm in a sales slump, why don't we go back and say, instead of looking for sales, I'm going to just see if the next person I call, if I can make their day. Like, I hope they're cranky. I hope it. Because then all of a sudden I can take it in the end of the call. I can be like, I'm the best thing that happened to that person today, and has nothing to do with insurance, has nothing to do with my widget that I'm selling. Go make it your personal mission to make the person's day on the phone. And if you do that, you'll get more satisfaction out of it. You'll think that, oh, my job is completely new. I'm not a salesperson anymore. I'm just a person helping other people. And you'll actually make more sales as an accidental byproduct. And for every person that's done that I've talked to, myself included, that's how I figured it out. That's been huge. It's like, it's not mundane anymore. We actually have like a real mission here. It's like help people.
Do you, I've never been part of a larger organization. I've always been self-employed, and I've never had coworkers, right? So I've never pinged things back and forth. So kind of what you're articulating seems like, dude, if you can just have fun, if you can just like put good juju out in the world, better things will come. Is that kind of like what it is? Like, just look, can you just have fun? Can you just have a good time? Like have a good time, share a good time, like get into it, whatever it is, and just stop focusing on the monkey on your shoulder, which is like, have you made money yet today? It's like, well, did you have a good time, and did you help other people have a good time?
Yeah, I mean, what comes around goes around, and like what you put out to the world is what you're going to get back. And so in sales, and you know this, but in sales, it's just a transfer of certainty from the seller to the buyer. They need my confidence. The person that I'm trying to make a sale with today, or help them, make a good decision, they don't have the confidence. If I'm going to a car lot, this is probably a bad example, but I'm going to a car lot, I don't know cars, then I don't want to research on the internet, then I'm going there, and if I knew what I wanted, if I was confident in my choice, I'd just show up and say, I want that one.
Right. I would have faxed in or something.
I would just buy it on the internet even, right? But the reason a salesperson even exists in the first place is they don't have the confidence that the salesperson has. They don't know all the ins and outs. So they're coming in and asking for advice. Whether they frame it that way or not, they want me to bless their decision so they can feel good about it. So like in our case, if they're buying an insurance policy, there's, let's say, 3 different policies. We need to make sure that they understand what they're buying and make a good choice. And if they knew that, they wouldn't need me. So if I have all this anxiety, or like, oh, I'm not making a sale. Oh my gosh, how am I going to feed my family? If I have all this anxiety inside of me, when I try to fake it on the phone or in person, they feel it. You are just projecting that onto the client. But if you're calm, cool, collected, you're happy, you're just goofing around and you're joking around with them, and you're just projecting that light and positivity, they're going to just walk away going, I don't know what it is about that guy, but I just really like him.
Yeah.
Make good decisions. So to your point, it's this likability factor. And all it is, like, are you interested in the other person? Are you asking them more questions than you're talking? Are you making like light of things and being kind of goofy and fun? That's how you make sales, not this like these gurus on the internet that are, you got to do this and this and this and push them into a corner and don't let them out. I'm like, dude, what are we talking about? Like, we're not in the military. Right. We're literally salespeople helping people make decisions.
You're an insurance broker, bro.
Like, don't act.
I'm not giving you 20.
You're not a Navy SEAL. Like, just go have a good time, joke around with people, make their day, and the money will follow. That should not be the primary objective.
There's this dude that came on, slid into the comment section like a month ago. So like, and some people, I don't respond, and I don't read a lot of the comments, because a lot of people just come on and they're like, you didn't even watch the clip. You didn't even watch the episode. You're just like, this person, like that. There's some pool of engagement that's, just nonsense. I think it's like 90% of the engagements, like bots, or people that are just marketing their own brand, or people that are just trying to, like get reactions. Like, I have this series of comments that always come in where it's like, Yeah, but what do you know about Bitcoin? It's like, this was a video on education stats. Like, what are you talking?
This has nothing to do with
Yeah,
Bitcoin.
right. But this one guy stuck out with me, and he was like, yeah, well, things are different now. Like in Idaho, the only option I have is going into the military or working at Winco. And I was like, huh. Well, that's not true, but, and I look up, obviously this one stuck. I was like, cause I get really bothered when people say that. And I look up his, go onto his Instagram profile, and it's like, oh, I got a YouTube, I got a TikTok, I got a Snap, I got whatever. So I go onto his YouTube. I'm like, I wonder what's on YouTube. And it's like streaming videos of him playing video games and stuff. And I get into this exchange with him, and he doesn't make any sense. We both know the only options in Idaho are not, you know, testament to you, the only options are not the military or Winco, right? Like that's a false premise. Like we're not going to start there.
Just scarcity mindset.
But what I felt like he reflected was this misunderstanding and despair that some men 17 or 18 to 25 are experiencing, which is this, we live in a hyper fertile world now. Meaning like you could get a job for Uber instantaneously. Like we have so many options for employment that I think people go to get like paralysis through choice. And they're like, well, I can't pick one, and therefore there aren't sufficient options. It's like, no. There are too many options.
Yeah.
And it just takes a little self-direction and a little imagination. And then it's like, it all comes open. Like, how did you overcome that? And how, when you find people like this that you're helping, how do you help them get through that? Because it makes my blood boil. It's like you have more opportunity for revenue production and great things now that have ever existed. Ever. You can make money from somebody in Bangladesh right now sitting here in Boise, Idaho, right? Like you can do so many things.
It's scarcity versus abundance at its core is what we're talking about. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes is by Henry Ford: whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. And so like this person that says, oh, it's the worst time in human history to try to find a job as a 20-year-old male or whatever.
In the Treasure Valley.
Yeah, in the Treasure Valley, in Idaho.
Yeah, right.
And, you know,
mind you, you and I both made up our professions. Like
made it up out of thin air, right? And it's like that person, to them, they're right. If they think that, if they believe that, then they're right to themselves. Then nothing's gonna change their mind. But if they could flip it to what your mindset is there's never been a better time in human history than right now as a young 20-year-old male to go make a bunch of money, or a young, 19-year-old female to go make a bunch of money, whatever the scenario is, then they're right too, right? And it's just how you see the world. And most people don't see the world in a positive light. Abundance is everywhere. When you start seeing opportunities like you do, or like I do, you start going and seeing everything's an opportunity. Every single conversation turns into another one. There's a study that was done, or like not a study, but like a case study, like a story.
Sure.
And there's this guy that walks into this theater, and they're watching this movie or whatever.
Whatever, sure.
And they walk in, and they're sitting next to each other, and the one guy turns to the other guy and goes, "Wow, that was the best movie I've ever seen." And the other guy looks at him and goes, "I was just about ready to say that was the worst movie I've ever seen." It's all perspective, right?
They're both right.
They're both right. This guy that can't find a job to save his life, he hasn't looked, first of all. And, to him, he won't go anywhere. That's the difference in the way your mindset, the way it's wired. So looking at opportunity, I think, is also kind of a skill. You can look at it and say, what could come of this? Narrow focus.
But Josh, look, you hit somebody who's like, it's the worst time ever. You're like, you're right. And you walk away. It's over. Like, I think the trick is it's not flipping the person that already has the skill to see the abundance and infinite opportunity. It's flipping the person who's like, this will never happen. It's like, yeah, maybe. Just come with me today. Like, work with me today on this. It's not going to work, but just work with me today. And then like, okay, look, it's not going to work. You got nothing else going on. So why don't you just come with me for day 2? Because it's not, I know it's not going to work, but like, what are you just going to go watch SpongeBob? Like, what are we doing today? Right. I feel like it's flipping those people and bringing them along as believers later on, because those are the people we need to tap into, right? Yeah. Like, you're not trying to educate people that are like you're already there. It's educating the 19-year-old who's posting streaming videos of video games on YouTube saying there's no opportunity for me. It's that guy that you got to grab.
Well, do you know that people that are posting streaming videos on YouTube, this is how I'd approach that guy. Is like, okay, if that's what, do you actually love doing that? Or is this just a form of depression? Well, no, I love doing it, Josh. okay, cool. If you actually love playing this video game, did you know there's people that are making actual millions of dollars because they got really good at that and really good at the editing of it, and they post it online, and they have these YouTube channels that have millions of followers, and they monetize it that way? Could you do that? Well, no, that sounds like a lot of work. Okay, now we got to talk about, work ethic and things like that.
Right. Do you actually love it if you're not willing to put a lot of work into it?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think that you have to love, and this is another reason that holds young people back right now, is we believe that we have to have this dream job,
Yes.
If you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. Well, that's not true. I get the premise of it,
Right.
but that's not a true statement. Do you love what you do right now, Matt?
Sure.
Yeah, you're great at this podcast. You're doing a great thing. You're helping others.
Yeah.
Are there days that are maybe like, oh, I don't know if I really want to edit, all those videos in a row today?
Yeah, 6 a.m. this morning. I was like, I am not feeling this editing life.
Yeah. So
Sitting at this seat, right? I was like, I can't today. But,
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, we do these seminars across the country, and there was one time where it was a 3-day event. This was recently in Phoenix, and I got actually physically sick on night number 2. I didn't sleep at all in the hotel room, which is not good when you're the one that talks all day long. Day 3, I was like, look, I don't know if I can do this. I woke up and I am literally eating Pepto-Bismol, which I don't even believe in that shit. But I'm like, I'll do anything.
I'm not about the Pepto life.
Yeah, my guy Rob was like feeding that stuff to me. Like, here's some Advil. Like, I had the stomach flu, and it was just a very bad experience. And I got to the event and I go, just got to do it. I committed to do it. What am I going to send all these people home? So when you have to do it, you just show up and do it. And I think that's a big difference, is like people think you have to love it. And that's my dream job, is motivating people in a room and having a room of people to talk to. And that day was not fun. It was awful for me. But you have to take the good with the bad. And the job that you start out with is not the job that you're going to have at the end of your life. Like, you've done a bunch of different things to find the thing that you really love, but along the way, you find things you love inside of it. Alex Hermosi is a pretty big influencer in the business community right now, and he talks about that as well. Like, just pick something, go after it, and even if you don't like it, you will find elements of yourself in the process that you love, that you didn't even realize were there. You were forced to start running some ads on Facebook, let's say. Maybe you didn't have any desire to do that in your life because you didn't understand what it felt like.
Right.
And then you do it because you have to in this new venture, and all of a sudden you realize you're really good at it and you love it. And then you go from this little, car washing business that you started, to running ads for that car washing business, to getting out of the car washing business altogether and starting an ad agency because you loved ads so much. Then you run an ad agency for 3, 4, 5 years. And at the end of that, you realize you're really good at hiring and training people, but you don't really want to do ad agency anymore. Then change your job. It's not that hard. Go figure it out. Go somewhere else. And now you're a CEO at a company, 10 years later, doing what you actually love, and you can ride that out to the rest of time. I just think people get so caught up in it has to be perfect from the start. Just go do something, take a course of action, and then correct it later.
Well, I think look, I love everything you're saying. And I think it's so disingenuous for people to say you have to love what you're doing from the start, because ultimately your optimal engagement is going to be when you're firing on all cylinders at max capacity. Okay. So for me at this point in my life, like I've been doing in the last 70 days, I've done it. I think it's over 150 podcasts. So I've been doing 15 a week nonstop. Now I do all the scheduling, all the production, all the distribution, all the social media, the whole thing, all the copy, the whole bit. And that is a compilation of aggregated skills over a long period of time. So now I have the skills in place to operate at this max potential for myself. And it's like, it wasn't perfect in the first podcast sitting in this room, right? Like first podcast was like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't my neighbor Connor, but and we were talking about local things. It wasn't bad, but it was nowhere near what I can do now. It took me all day to edit too. It was like having the conversation. Then I was like going through this, like, I didn't know what I was doing. Again, like I knew enough to get rolling. But again, aggregating the skills so you can be that optimally functioning person. That's where you're most happy. Well, getting those skills is going to take forever, right? You might be patching them together and then 15 years later, like here's an example. I learned this move called the Darce when I was like a blue belt or purple belt in jiu-jitsu years ago. I'm talking 2011. I remember the night I learned it. I remember I was like, I can in my mind's eye. And I remember thinking like, this isn't working for me. Like, I don't understand. It's like, it's like that. And no joke, it wasn't until I was a black belt for 4 years that all of a sudden I started slapping the darts on people, just boom, hitting it from all of these different places. Because I had this one thing, right? This one submission series that didn't fit with the other joining movements and conceptualization of movement with a training partner or with a competitor. Once all of those other things fell into place, all of a sudden it was like a block, just dropped right into place. And the darce now is my absolute favorite move.
And
right?
now it works because you have
works.
the elements to
I
put
can hit it from across the room. Like I could choke you right. I'm not even touching you. But it's that type of thing in a broader spectrum when you talk about people in their careers. It's like you're going to aggregate skills that you don't know where they fit. But eventually, if you keep at it, you will become the person where it's like everything falls in line. You're like, I learned that day 1. I learned that day 2000. I learned that, and now you're optimally functioning with all of these skill sets that you've learned.
You're invoking something in me that you're bringing this out of me, like this question that I have, underlying question that's hard to answer. People have been debating it for ages, right? Is like, so what is the goal of life? Like, I think when we get down to some of this, it's like, okay, what lens are you seeing the world through as you're learning these skills? Do I go and I learn, am I looking at, okay, how can I learn the most skills? Life's about how can I get the most amount of money? I think a lot of young, ambitious people, myself included at a certain point, thought the goal was to get to a certain financial benchmark.
Sure.
So we set out, and the biggest that I could think, I read 50-something books in 12 months between my junior and senior year of high school on personal development, sales, finance, business, personal development, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, the biggest I could still think coming from a small town in Idaho is when I'm 30, I was 18 or whatever at the time, when I'm 30 and I work my ass off for a decade, I'm going to make $100,000 a year. And I thought that was the biggest thing. And that's a good amount of money, don't get me wrong, but it's definitely not like, a 12-year goal.
Yeah,
that was just as big as I thought. And we hit that when I was 19, by the way. And I remember thinking like, okay, we hit 100,000 when I was 19. And I remember waking up and going, calculating it out on my friggin' spreadsheet. I'm all excited about it.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought this would feel different.
Right.
Not even better, but just like different. You know what? I was just naive. 100,000 is not that much money. So I set a goal that same day. Didn't even celebrate it. How about 250? That seems like, way more money. That seems like a financial goal. Let's go for it.
That seems like 2.5 times as much money.
Yeah, exactly. So we go for it. And don't get me wrong, like these benchmarks are helpful for my family and helpful for our giving and all these different things. And it does change life. But what I was looking for, the fulfillment that I was looking for, whatever hole was inside of me, get to 250, I would have thought this felt different. Get to 500, I would have thought this felt different. Get to 1 million, certainly the heavens are going to open up and, everything's going to be better in my life. Everything's going to be perfect when I hit that coveted 7-figure 1 million mark. Then I can be a 7-figure entrepreneur. You know what I'm saying? And we hit it. And I go,
it felt different.
Yeah, it didn't change. Like, there's some niceties along the way. You can do more with your life, whatever. Yeah, money's a tool and you can use it for good or evil, whatever. And I believe we're using it for good. But the point of the story is, if life is about making the most amount of money as possible, then we're all screwed because somebody else is making way more than you. There's going to be a billionaire or trillionaire in a few years that is going to always be worth more than you. So what is the goal of life? I believe the goal of life, currently, this is my best theory. Best theory. It's going to evolve over time. But it's how do I become the 10.0 best version of me? To your point, those skills, if you look at life through that lens, then the first year when I made $14,000 and all my buddies running a shovel, literally doing anything on the side of the road, like those people are making 4 times more money than me. That year, the skills I learned made me closer to my goal. The next year, the skills I learned made me closer to my goal, etc. And I think that point of view just changes everything. Like it changes the way that you go through and think about these experiences. Instead of it being, a big failure or, I'm so far behind. No, what skills did you learn this year? I know your pay didn't increase as much as you thought it should at age 21.
Right.
But what skill did you learn? Because 3 years from now, that jujitsu move is going to make sense.
Oh, right. And it was like purple belt to it was like 7 years later. It's like all of a sudden the darce is everywhere. I'm like, I see it. It was literally like, you remember the Matrix when he finally sees the green code? He's like, I see it. It was like kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. And now it's like I teach people the darce every time I train. I'm like, listen, it's I always knew when even as a younger person, I've never been motivated by the like, I want to make the most money. I was motivated by two things: freedom and family. And that was it. And so for me, I got to, I made a certain amount of money, which I'm very blessed and pleased to have made. Not as much as you, but like I made money, but there's nobody who spent more time with their family. Like that was the kicker. So for me, especially in my children's earlier years, being an SAT tutor, I would only go to work at like 4:00 in the afternoon. So 5 days a week, from the second they wake up until like 3:45, we're hanging out and doing whatever. Like and then they usually go to bed 6:30. So I'm only gone just a couple hours of their waking day, right? And so we had this great relationship, and I'm not like, I'm 42. I'm going to be 43 soon. I'm not sitting around saying like, gosh, I really botched it as a 36-year-old. I should have like made a lot more money when I was 36. Like, not at all. Like, I have relationships with my children. I have memories. Like I don't often have nostalgic moments, but I've had a couple dreams in the last couple months, remembering back to the time when my kids were toddlers, like 4, 2, and infant. Right. So they're about 2 years apart. I remember my wife being at home with our youngest son, who was literally just born. And I took the other two out. They were monsters. There's like, one was 60 pounds, one was like 30 pounds. So 90 pounds collectively. And we had a double bob. Okay. And I go running with the double bob. And
we got 2 double bobs now.
Baby.
Yeah.
There you go. And so I would take them running, and I would bring snack traps, like snap peas and stuff, and they'd get their little planes with propellers on them, and they'd stick their hands up the side of the bob, and we'd be like running down the street. And I lived in a hilly area, and not even terribly hilly, but like definitely hills, like foothills. So I'd be like pushing this 90-pound bob up these hills, like, oh, and I'd like, come on guys, we're gonna go to the post office, whatever. And those are the things that I think back, like those are the things that like marked my insides, remembering my children hanging their hand out. All I could see, it's like the double bob because you got the hood on it, right? And I just see this little hand hanging out with this propeller plane, the propeller going around, or like this little
that's
hand
an image
hanging out the side with like a snack trap, and they're like giggling and having a great time. It's like, that's what mattered to me.
You can't buy that.
There is no amount of money that you could have paid me to give up those memories. Like, that's it for me.
I resonate with every single part of that story. There's a book I'm writing called The True Freedom Equation, and it's almost done. And the whole premise of it is what you're talking about. Is like, most people, all these gurus on the internet, they're like, go, I kind of like some of it. Like, if I'm like ready to like go do something.
Hustle.
Yeah, great. I like it. But like, to the point where it's like, you're going to wish, you spend the next 5 years of your life and you go out and you hustle and you grind and you make all the sacrifices, and your family's going to thank you in 5 years when you make all this money. And I'm just like, have you actually lived that? Because like, one thing that, I've hustled, but one thing that we've always done right is my wife, and this is blessings and kudos to her, because she said, hey, you can work as early as you want in the morning, but I think this is when we got married. We didn't have kids yet. I want to have a family. Like, I don't want it to be like you caught up in work all the time. Like, I want you to go hard when you're at work, and then when we're home, I want to be home. Is that something that we could agree on? And she led that conversation, and I'm very blessed for that. 5:30 p.m. rolls around, always home, sometimes earlier. And everyone's like, well, that's impossible. And they like to blame their kids for their lack of success. And I don't have any sympathy for that anymore, because I'm like, look, it is hard, but then get up earlier and go to work. I think it's a noble purpose, and you're an embodiment of this. I think it's a noble purpose as a dad, that the person in your life that suffers for your success is you. It's not noble to make your kids suffer for your financial success. That's not noble. It is what it is. It's your choice, whatever. No judgment, but it's not. Why not get up earlier? Why not stay up later? Why don't, when your kids are awake at night, go spend some time with your kids? You don't regret any of those moments. And you could have made more money. Sure, whatever. Sure, I could have done better in different areas. But it's like, something's got to give, and it shouldn't be the kids.
Man, I have never heard it articulated that way, which is, don't make your kids pay for your success. I mean, and I couldn't agree with you more. This, again, the volume of work that I've done in the last few months by myself, going down this path. Yeah. Like I'm home at 5:30. That's it. That's all there is to it. In fact, we had an entrepreneurs meeting, just a little neighborhood thing, over the holiday, and everybody was kind of recounting their year. And my comment to it was not like, hey, I made this money or I did whatever. It's like, no. I had whatever success I had, but I was home 5 p.m. every day. And especially over the last few months, it's like, yeah, you're up at 4. Like, that's right. Yeah. And at like 9:30 at night, you go into a medically induced coma. Like you're dead. And when the alarm goes off, you want to die, and you're going to get up and you're going to keep going. And by the way, once you know what's so funny about getting to work at like 4:30 in the morning? If you don't max it out at 4:30, you shouldn't have fucking got up.
Yeah.
If you don't crush from the second you sit down, your ass should have slept in. It's almost like pushing it harder brings a level of intensity and intention. So it's like, if you want to be the guy who gets up at 4 to go to work and then just piss off and be on Facebook, you're a damn fool. It's like, I'm going to milk every damn, and I'm talking like, it was down to like, in the heat of it, it was down to like, if I missed 2 or 3 minutes, I missed getting out one additional piece of social media content. I missed ripping this one little thing. I missed making a thumbnail for this thing. And it's like, it would set me back. And I had so many dominoes in place that would just fall over that it was like, I missed it. And by the way, I'm going home at 5:30. Like and you're going to get up at 4 tomorrow. You're going to pay the piper, but it's not on their backs.
Well, here's the thing though. And this is not judgment on others that don't get this right, because there's certainly so many things that I do not get right. But it's like most people in that scenario will say to their spouse and to their kids, I'm sorry, I can't. I got too much going on, because they fell behind by 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a half an hour.
Whatever it is. Yeah.
And so instead of coming home at, let's just say the established time was 5 p.m. to make math easy, it's all of a sudden, I'll be home at 6:30. Okay, like one off, not a big deal, whatever.
Sure. But
then the next day, you, instead of getting up at 4, you sleep until 5. And now you're an hour behind, but well, I was going to go 4 a.m. to 5 p.m., but yesterday I didn't get home till 6:30. So today your brain is giving you an excuse and saying, well, it's not a big deal if I show up at 6:30 again tonight. All of a sudden, there's this creep that happens.
Right.
And now your work schedule is coming home at 6:30. Well, you traded an hour of non-kid time that was just only on you at early in the morning. You traded that for kid time. And now again, it's not a noble purpose to take that time away from your kids or your spouse, right? And now it makes you lazy. All of a sudden you're not getting up early at all, and you're not getting home till 9 p.m. and everybody wonders why your family life is a wreck.
Right.
And this is a big deal for me, because there's multiple times in my journey that I did my best. Thank God I have my spouse. That I did my best on accident to ruin that. I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, I was just a salesperson, but now I'm a marketing expert, and I have, now I'm doing all this. Now I have, 8 employees. Now I'm doing this. Now I'm coaching other people. And so like life just isn't the same.
And I'm so important.
And I'm so important.
I deserve this extra time.
Yeah, and I started saying things to my wife, like in conversation, like little arguments we'd get into, like, well, how do you expect me to do all this when anyone else in my shoes would just, they don't come home at the same time as me, and I'm doing more than them. Like, look how arrogant that is, first of all. Like, comparing myself to others is a good way to
anybody
win an argument with my wife, right?
Right.
Like,
she's like, well, I didn't marry those losers. You're like, damn it, you're right.
And she literally said something not quite as aggressive as that, but she's like, I thought that I married, you, and it's a good thing that you're not like everybody else and you can figure it out.
Right.
And that was a huge thing for me. You just have to learn how to compress time. And so I started hiring more people that could take more off my plate, because I didn't have the excuse that I could get home at 8 p.m. That was not a thing in our house. I was like, I'm home. And it was a mutual commitment. So it was a huge blessing in disguise. There's some tense moments there. But because I had to get more done in less time, it made me more efficient. And I started delegating faster. I believe I'd still be stuck. Most entrepreneurs get stuck sub 1 million because they do every single thing themselves, even when they can start to outsource, to delegate some of it. Right. It's like, hey, if the resources are there, I just didn't see it.
Right.
It forced me.
There was this Schwarzenegger motivational speech or something. He was like speaking to a graduating class or something, and he had this great bit about, he's like, so what if you're tired? Sleep faster. It doesn't matter. Get up earlier. Sleep faster.
That's a good impersonation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And like he really made his way, whatever you think about him, he has been really, like, there are a lot of people that lift weights. There are a lot of people that want to be in movies. Not a lot of people have done what he's done. Right. So like there was something unique about him, and he had, like, I'm sure you read Tools for Titans. And the great interview with him, which was, he's talking about, doing brickwork with his friend and like screaming in different languages back and forth, because they were big into like artisan construction and like old world craftsmanship and stuff. And he's like, that was the golden diet. Like I'd go work out in the morning, then I'd go lay bricks and all of these different things, and then I'd go work out in the evening, and then we'd make all this money. I'd invest it. I'd go home. I'd die. I'd wake up again and do it again. And I remember reading that and also hearing that speech. With like, sleep faster speech. And there does come a point when you just have to decide, it's like, you got to make a trade. You're either going to trade what you could be for comfort, or you're not. Like, that's it. So what you could be is 4 a.m. and what's comfortable is like 6 a.m. And you're going to have to make a choice. Who do you want to be in 6 months? Who do you want to be in a year? Do you really want to give up that extra 2 hours a day and give up what you could be? And that is such a difficult realization to have.
The way you say that is very motivating to me. Like, looking at your future, it's a very emotional thing for me. Like, looking at 10 years from now, who do I want to be? And the trades that I made are going to determine who that person is the way I'm interpreting what you're saying. And it's like, okay, do I really want to get 10 years down the road and look back on my last decade and say, I'm the same person because I just traded comfort every time. Every time something got hard, I just traded it out for comfort. No progress. You're not going to look back and be like, oh, I'm really upset that I put all that energy in at the gym or at jujitsu or whatever. I'm so upset that I did that every day. No. You're going to look back on that and be like, I'm really proud that I made those choices and it got me here.
Right.
I'm addicted to that idea. The bricklayer thing, but that's still like
sleep faster.
Yeah, like you just got like no excuses.
Yeah, dude. And here he's going to like, he's bodybuilding, he's lifting, he's doing all these things, and then he's going to work not as like an accountant. He's laying bricks and just. I feel like there's an aspect of just capacity that has come on in my later years, and I'm not that much older. I'm like a decade older than you, but like in the last 4 or 5 years, just this capacity to be better and be bigger, and the relevance to that in my life. Like, I look at this time at this point. So I'm 42, I'm going to be 43. And I keep looking at so I've been at this podcast since I was 40. Right. And I'm very aware as of late that it's like, this is it, man. This is your decade. This is the only decade you're going to have, because you're not going to reinvent yourself at 55. I mean, maybe you will for fun or whatever, or necessity. Like, if I had to, I absolutely would. But in the absence of a crisis where you're forced to like take on like a third or fourth career at 55, in the absence of whatever, like, this is it. This is where you harness value that you bring to the world. And dude, it's every day that goes by, especially dealing with things like social media. It's like, listen, I can only post, let's say, 4 things a day. Okay. Just because you hit a saturation point. If you publish 20 things a day, the algorithm will down-regulate. You're like, this dude's wackadoo. Doesn't even matter how good it is. It's like, I don't know, we're not dealing with him. So you can only do 4. Okay. If you miss a day, those are 4 posts you'll never get back. You'll never have that opportunity again. One of those could have been the one, right? It's like, and there's just this urgency that has come on to me in the last couple of years where it's like, oh my gosh, dude, every day. Yeah, I'll be up at 4. Yeah, no problem. There's not even anybody here. It's just Matt, like me by myself.
I love your urgency, and I don't want to take any wind out of your sails, but do you want to hear my prediction for your life? Ready for this?
Yeah, hit me.
I think you said 55, right? I think at 55, you'll be better than you are now.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, sure, you don't want to maybe restart something, and this next decade could be really defining for you. But I hear the urgency, but I also think that, like, balancing that with the idea that, like, this effort is going to make you so good when you're 55, you're never going to stop. Let's just be honest. What's going to change? And like, you're not you're not going to be ever someone, in my opinion, by just reading you and having a couple conversations, you're never going to stop. You might not do the things that you don't want. You might not be the one editing the videos if that's not what you want to do.
Sure.
But you're the talent. And I don't think you're ever going to stop that. It might not be the same rigorous pace, but it'll be bigger impact, higher leverage guess, more impact, more volume, or less volume, but more quality. I'm not trying to like disagree with you. I think the urgency is great. I think that you're probably not going to peak in the next 10 years. I think you're going to keep just building on that.
I don't think I agree with you in that I think at 55, I will still have, I assume I'll be better next year. Like, get the hell out. 2026, the governor's races, I'm going to get every single candidate in this room to sit in that chair.
Let's go.
And I'm going to be like, hey, bring a bag of lunch. This is going to be like a 3-hour conversation. Because by the way, there's nobody in the state that's a civilian that knows more about the state than I do. Like cross industry. And I'm going to call all my friends from every single industry and find out what they would want to know. So like, get ready. So these are going to be incredible things that come down the pipe. I guess my urgency comes from there is no time to wait. Right? Like if you just blow off the next 10 years, if you don't keep learning DARSas and you don't keep learning new skills and you don't keep digging into optimizing yourself and being everything you can be now, it's like you're not going to start over at 55. And again, I would if I had to, but there's so much value in every day that goes by today, right? Like right now that it's almost like, it gives me anxiety. It's like, did you do enough today? Be home at 5:30. But did you do enough today?
Like do it now. Tomorrow never comes. Tomorrow never comes. So like it's never promised, so I love that. And we have this like activator action based, similarity. So we love talking about that subject. And a lot of people don't. Where do you think you get your grit from? Like
like in general?
Yeah, we're talking like we're talking about like Schwarzenegger, like this,
sleep faster.
Yeah, and he's like doing the brick work and stuff. Like he could go to that story and be like, there's a lot of grit. And it wasn't born there necessarily, but that's where it comes from. Like working out in the morning. Can you just imagine that? Working out in the morning, doing brickwork all freaking day. Everyone else in the world would be like, I'm not working out. I'm working out all day. They wouldn't work out in the morning or at night. He's doing both. That's grit. Where do you get this grit from that allows you to wake up at 4 a.m?
Oh, you tell me, dude. Where do you get your grit from? Get the hell out of here. This is my show. I ask the questions.
Okay, I'll answer then. Well, for me, it's no doubt. It's from my dad. Not everyone is lucky to grow up with awesome parents. Yeah, right. I was very blessed. Grew up on a farm, central Idaho, town of 1,000 people, more cows than humans in that area. And, we had about 100 head of cattle, and I'd wake up every day and feed cows. I also liked video games, which is fascinating. Yeah. Not the shoot 'em up video games, but like I would go and play these like NBA games and NFL games on career mode, and like I wouldn't even play the game. I was just like dealing with like salary caps and trading players, and that should have been like a sign. But
did you ever get into like the sim games, SimCity and like the Sims, where you're like making your own character?
For like a minute, but I was more like into the world domination, like what's that one called? Like Empire Earth.
Yes.
Age of Empires.
Yeah. Dude,
like build your civilization, like have the barracks over there, like train soldiers.
Yeah, those were great. Yeah, strategy games.
I wasn't really like my parents didn't love me playing those games because I don't know if they thought
your parents didn't love you. I'm like, well, I can see that.
It's like, a little bit of a weird combo, like
fine.
Sports, like there's like this empire builder like mentality that I probably should have picked up on earlier. Luckily, I didn't turn into like one of the bad guys, but
not yet.
Yeah, there's always time. But it's just, that's where the grit comes from, is like, I'd wake up and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to trade. I had an agenda on my NBA basketball career mode thing. I had an agenda, so I'd just wake up before everyone else, 45 minutes, an hour early, play my game. Then when everyone got up, I'd go feed cows. So that's an interesting combo. Go feed, you're throwing, 50, 60, of those 80-pound bales a day, little squares. And it just doesn't matter. Like if in high school, when you get home at 1 a.m. from a bus trip, from a basketball game far away, and you get home and you're finally in bed by 1 a.m., doesn't matter. Cows still got to eat. Next day you just get up, you do it. You're sore from basketball. Oh, boo-hoo. You know what I mean?
Right.
And my dad was always really respectful, so he didn't say it like that. But that's kind of the drill. You just do it because that's what's expected. And my biggest concern as of late is I don't live that lifestyle with my kids. And so I'm like, how do you instill that work ethic? So my wife went out and bought some goats and bought chickens. And now it's like, okay, what did I get myself into? But I think just having the requirement to do something, whether you want to or not, early on in your life, is so imperative for kids.
Yeah. As you're talking about these things, I think one thing that we probably shared in common is I developed the capacity to work without any reason, right? So for instance, I had a paper route. It's like, whether you're sick, whether it's raining, whether it's hot, like whether you stay out till 1 a.m., like you're up, man. Like you're up, you're doing it. And I remember one time in particular, I got food poisoning. It's like, I was up taking these papers, like walking. I remember like throwing up on somebody's lawn. I'm sorry, person. But like, I was sick. Like, I don't know what you want me to do, but like I was out throwing the papers. But I wasn't throwing the papers. As I look back on it, it was such a curious thing to me because I wouldn't throw papers and then like be waiting by the mailbox for my check. I wouldn't. In fact, when you have a paper route, you can have people that pay directly to the news carrier, or you can go and do your collections, where it's like you have essentially this bill. You're like, hey, I threw papers for you this month. You owe me, where's my $2?
Yeah,
right, that kind of thing. And for me, I wouldn't even go collect. It didn't even matter. Like the money didn't even matter. And as like a 14-year-old, I'd put in this work. I'd be thrown up on the lawn. It would be pouring rain outside. And then I'd get this thing. It's like, okay, go get the money that you've earned. Like you earned this. And it's like, meh. And it's just like, I remember because I would only collect when I needed the money for something. So I remember with this one guy, I went to collect on 6 months. And he was like, I was like, you owe me $87. He was like, what? I was like, yep, $87. He's like, hang, honey. He's like, I know we paid it. She's like, no, we haven't paid him. Like, and so then they canceled. They're like, it's costing us $100. So, but for me, like that was it in sports. I was good enough at sports, but I was not the guy.
Yeah.
There was this guy, Trent Holzman, who's this incredible swimmer, went to the Olympic trials, all this stuff. And he was like the swimmer. And if I were Trent and like awesome at swimming and that was my thing, it's like this positive feedback. It's like, yeah, I could see why I'd keep swimming. I was not Trent Holzman.
Yeah.
I was just a dude. Like, yeah, I was captain of the team, but I wasn't super, super fast. I developed early on the capacity to work without these positive reinforcement mechanisms of finance or success. And that it certainly allowed me in the last 3 years to show up here by myself, whether people are watching or not, and continue getting better, because I'm not looking for like that paycheck. I'm not looking for the pat on the back. I'm not looking for any of these things. And that leads to years down the road having this thing where people are like, how did you get here? It's like, I don't know, man. I just kept showing up every day. And that's what I hear you saying too, which is, look, you show up, you have obligation, you work, you develop the capacity to work in the absence of this positive feedback loop. And that makes you into this engine that will hum along through everything, no matter what happens.
That's at another level, and you're getting me fired up.
I want to do push-ups. Let's do push-ups.
Let's do push-ups. Let's go. I am fired up on that. And it comes down to like, that's a way to articulate instant gratification versus delayed gratification. And those are just like buzzwords. So like people don't even know what they mean anymore.
Right.
They're just like, it's just like a word.
Yeah, right.
But when you put it that way, that's very, very similar to my story about growing our company, and we've been in it. I'll just make the math easy. 10 years. It's like 7.5 or whatever, but sure. 10 years, the first year I made $14,000 working my ass off. And I read all the books. And I was, as a 19-year-old, I was as on fire as probably most people, let's just say.
Sure.
And I was excited. I was going out. I was doing the thing.
You sold Jim. You
sold
Jim on the policy.
That freaking auto policy with Oregon Mutual, the insurance company. I was like fired up about it. And I made $14,000. And then you fast forward, let's say towards the end of the decade of my career so far, and the company's worth $50 million. Well, it's really difficult when you're making $14,000 to see, and not only see, but believe that the end actually looks that good. When everyone else is doing way less work than you, all your friends, all your peers, everyone around you is 19 and they're making 50 or 60 grand and you made 14, and they're doing basically no creative work. They're running a shovel on a rock crusher, or great job, but just not what I wanted. It was really hard. People making fun of your view. One time we were playing poker at my house, and I was 19 and nobody else had a house. Like I didn't go to college, and people were making fun of my car outside. This group of guys. I drove a 91 Mercury Grand Marquis. They should make fun of that car, you know?
What was it white?
White cop car.
Yes.
It was like the boat.
Oh
like
my God.
literally inherited it for like a $2,000 car. Inherited it from my wife's grandmother in California.
Hell
It was like a pristine
Grand Marquis.
Grand Marquis.
With a Q.
So yeah. And they are making fun of this car, and they all have nice cars that are on loans and all this stuff. And some of those guys, if they listen to the podcast, are awesome. Some of those guys are not.
Ah.
And you know, you're sitting around and you're going, okay, you're starting to beat yourself up because you're like, okay, do I really believe that making 14,000 is what I'm here to do?
Right.
Even though you know in the back of your brain, if you do the work, you'll get there eventually. And, you know, certainly now it's a lot easier because I proved the theory. We went from 14 to 45 and it just double all the way to the end. And I like to look at it this framework now is like, what if in 10 years, let's just use the number $50 million. If in 10 years you can make a $50 million payday for yourself or any number, then the value that you actually received from the work you put in that first year was not $14,000. It was 1/10, 1 year out of 10 years, 1/10 of $50 million. Because without that, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5 wouldn't have existed. You had to start somewhere. And so I know we've talked about this before, and it's like that framework has helped me now in this next adventure because it's like, hey, starting from the ground zero on a podcast, this first podcast maybe gets 100 views. Big freaking whoop, right? It's 100 people and you want it to be 1 million. But guess what? You fast forward 5, 6, 7 years and it will be those millions of people, to your point. And the value in the beginning is just as equal as the value in the end. You just haven't seen the results yet. You haven't harvested. It's the seeds and the harvest thing. Planting seeds.
The seeds and the harvest. It's
planting seeds, water them,
this.
Everyone harvests.
I got you. God bless him, man. What a time to be alive. What a crazy thing. Listen, let's do this. I feel like we've smashed a bunch of stuff today. Let's do this. Let's call it today. We did a solid hour. Let's line up another one in a month or two. All right, let's keep chugging. Are you doing any events in the area coming up?
Yes. So Ignite Gen Z, the first event's going to be at the end of June. So awesome. June 27th and 28th. Nice. It's a free event. Anyone can come. So it's not just for 20-year-olds in college and high school kids. But we encourage parents to bring their kids that are that age. We're going to talk about goal setting, plans, taking action, and then about half the event is about communication. Like how do you talk in a way that makes you likable and your tonality, your body language.
Right.
A lot of things that just the computer generation of us have a harder time picking up on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, awesome, man. Listen to me. How can people find you?
Yeah, just Joshua Lustig anywhere online. Go to our YouTube channel, follow our podcast. We'd love to be in touch.
God bless you, sir. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for the conversation. We'll do it again.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Appreciate it.